Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. It is 2:02 p.m. East Coast time. Today is Tuesday, September 17th. Getting our picks video, right? Or at least our initial picks. I'll do my final thoughts on Friday. And really, it's not picks. It's just ranks better for SEO. It's my interest for the most part at the beginning of the week. Remember, it's Tuesday. Literally, week 3 has just started today after Monday Night Football finished up last night. So I'm going to be going position by position, my interests. I'm going to be giving you data, snap percentages, targets, whatever it might be to say why I like it. I have all this data that needs to be updated right here for every single position. All the key stats. You can get those over on Patreon. Welcome to the channel if you are new here. My name is Sal Vetri, and I'm beyond excited because this might be the week that we hit 10,000 subscribers. So thank you to all the current subscribers. You all friggin' rock. I love doing this so much, so thank you so much. I cover daily fantasy sports in the NFL, NBA, WNBA, and MLB streets. A little bit of golf, but not as much. So I appreciate all of you that are here. If you are new to the channel and you get any value from this video or something you've seen of mine, please hit the subscribe button. We're about to hit 10,000 subscribers probably by the end of the week. And the quicker we get there, honestly, the better. That was a goal of mine by the end of December to hit, and we're going to be well ahead of that. So thank you all so much. People seem to be getting value from these videos. What do you like the most out of these videos? Comment that down below. And lastly, just my personal plugs. I do have a Twitter at SalVetriDFS. You can follow me over there. I'll be live on Awesomo's channel on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday at 11 a.m. helping out with NFL content. And also I have a Patreon. Link down below. Exclusive content. Lots of stuff comes out there. Just snappers, a bunch of stuff, right? My projections, articles, exclusive podcasts over there, exclusive live streams, my cash game tiers, a bunch of stuff. So you can check it out. It's linked down below if you're interested, as well as some other free giveaways are linked down below. So without further ado, hit the subscribe button if you get any value. We had like 500 something likes on our Friday video. That's crazy. Let's see if we could break that. If you hit the like button, I appreciate that. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Let's buckle up. Let's take a Tuesday look position by position. Starting with the quarterback. You can see I don't have many notes right now because I don't really want to put my notes down. I'll say them out loud. I'll put my notes down later in the week. But Patrick Mahomes right now against Baltimore, the highest total game, 54 in the slate. Lamar Jackson and Patty Mahomes. If you're paying up a quarterback, sure, go there. In cash games, I don't pay up. And honestly, for this week, there is so much value at running back. Or actually, no, I'll take that back. No, walk that back. Quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end. Running back, I'm not going below a certain price point, and we'll get there when we get there. But for quarterback right now, yeah, Mahomes and Jackson, I probably don't get up to them, but there's clear 30 to 35 point upside between the two of them. Patrick Mahomes had over 250 yards and 4 touchdowns in the second quarter alone. That's nuts. That's goddamn nuts. So yeah, 7,600 is fine for this guy. We know what he can do. He's still not priced up. It seems Draftkings just can't price him up enough as a quarterback at $8,000. Clearly, that's going to steer a lot of people away. But this guy is just unreal in terms of what he can do week in and week out. Same thing for Lamar Jackson. Goes for over 120 yards on the ground last week. Showed that he can do it not only in the air after week 1, a very effective week, right? Something that's not sustainable in the air, but still look good through the air, over 270 yards. Albeit 2 very easy matchups. Kansas City will possess not a good defense, but a lot better than the last 2 they have seen. Definitely in play, definitely have interest right now for GPPs, and really it's going to depend on ownership. Like if we finally get Patrick Mahomes at 5% due to all the value at quarterback and due to the fact that he's still very expensive, 7,600, well then yeah, I'm going to have a lot more interest. If he still has normal percentages in like the 10 to 15% ownership, I'd probably go somewhere else. Dak Prescott. So last week we had a very big total on this game against New England for Miami, 18.5. Tom Brady, there was concerns, it's too big of a spread. Usually it's too big of a spread for a quarterback to do well compared to other quarterbacks on the slate, and that's what happened. Tom Brady still did well, but not as well as other games and other quarterbacks that were in more competitive games, right? He scored 25 points. That's very good. And I think Dak can do the exact same thing. They're 21-point favorites. Like, here's the thing. People are worried that they're going to pull Dak and pull Zeke and all these guys. If they go up 33 or 35-3 in this game and pull them in the end of the third or beginning of fourth quarter, don't you think Dak and Zeke have done something and this offense has done something? You don't score 35 points without Dak or Zeke going crazy, or both of them for that matter, right? So I have no worries in terms of those players getting pulled and the concerns there, because if it's 35-3 at the start of the fourth quarter and then they pull them, there's a really good chance Dak has 25 plus fantasy points. Zeke has 20 plus. Maybe that's the name of both of them. Zeke has 20 plus fantasy points. So no concern there. Dak has been absolutely incredible. His price point's too low. Josh Allen at 5,900. Price point doesn't come up. Cincinnati secondary was terrible last year. Early on this year, it's looked atrocious. Bottom 5 in the league through 2 weeks per Pro Football Focus. Made Jimmy G, who is, I believe, a good quarterback, but made him look just so fantastic on limited passing attempts. Went for just 297, almost 300 yards, 297 yards, 3 touchdowns on below 30 pass attempts for Jimmy G. I think it was like 25. Absolutely insane. That's how bad the Cincinnati defense is. They got lit up a little bit in week 1 as well. So Josh Allen, a guy who can score on the ground, doesn't matter if he throws interceptions, things like that. He had 4 turnovers week 1, still 19.96 fantasy points. Josh Allen is in a very good spot because not only can he just throw the ball and have a lot of time and also going to be going up against a bad defense in Cincinnati, which favors him, he actually has a reliable number 1 receiver. John Brown looks very elite out there. Let me say that right now. He's not just running deep routes like people think John Brown only runs down the field straight. He was running in that last game slants, intermediate routes, and he looked very, very good, catching 7 balls for 72 yards. And that's a good thing for me to see. Like, I don't care if he doesn't hit the home run. I would like to happen, but I'd rather him not be boom or bust like Deshaun Jackson, in my opinion, and those types of players that only go straight down the field. I like that he's running intermediate routes. That helps Josh Allen overall as well. So yeah, Josh Allen rushing upside, 2 rushing touchdowns, one in each of the first 2 weeks. Looks good. Kyler Murray, it's hard not to like the guy. They're playing so fast. He threw for 349 yards last week in a difficult matchup, which I was saying all week it wasn't as difficult because the Baltimore Ravens are very banged up right now on defense. Now he's going to get to go up against Carolina. Look, they run so many 3 and 4 wide receiver sets that 3 of their 4 wide receivers are in the top 4 in the NFL in routes run. 3 of their 4 in the top 4 for NFL in routes run per game. So yeah, overall, that's per Football Focus is where you get that information as well. Routes run, yards per route run. But yeah, Kyler Murray, it's hard not to like him. We haven't even seen the rushing upside yet because they're just throwing so much. David Johnson seems to have avoided any type of serious injury. This offense is still fully healthy. I think Kyler Murray is fine. I think he's in play. Jameis Winston, this is the spot. I put him in my cash game lineup for the first look lineup, and I got a lot of slack. First off, it's the first time I'm opening the tab. So in 15 minutes, I'm building what I consider to be a good lineup in 15 minutes. Clearly, it's not. Clearly, I'm never going to play that lineup. So for all the slack I get, just keep that in mind. But also, why don't you like Jameis this week? I don't understand. What are people scared of? His week 1 performance, where it was honestly fluky. O.J. Howard tips a ball for a pick 6. The center fumbles a snap that gets credited to Jameis. Look, he had a bad week 1 for sure, but it wasn't as bad as people think. And he had a very good week 2. 25 attempts. He had over 8 yards per attempt. That's pretty good on 25 attempts. Scored a touchdown. They just didn't have to do much. They ran 31 times with their running backs, 36 times overall in week 1 compared to 25 attempts. That's not what Tampa's game plan is moving forward in most weeks. It was just a unique week on Thursday Night Football. But why are you not liking Jameis? He's 5,400. He's in a fantastic offense. Let's just say that right now. That right now is playing below their standards. So like through a 2-game sample, we do not expect Tampa Bay to play at this level the entire season. Through a 16-game sample, we expect much more. All of the industry is anchored on week 1 Jameis Winston's bad play. Week 2, he looked good. Jameis Winston looked good in week 2 on Thursday Night Football. I don't know what everybody else was watching, but they're just so stuck on what happened in week 1. Do you not realize that right now the Tampa Bay Bucks have a top 4 team total on the slate? Do you not realize that they're playing the worst defense through the first 2 weeks, according to Pro Football Focus? Dead last in terms of how much they pressure the quarterback. If you're not going to pressure Jameis, he's not going to make as many mistakes. Dead last in pass protection. Jameis, albeit inaccurate at times, not going to play good defense on him with Mike Evans running around out there, not playing up to par, with Chris Godwin playing fantastic, looking like the number 1 receiver on that team. O.J. Howard still playing a lot of snaps, not running as many routes, but now has been called out by his coach. What's not to like at $5,400 for a guy who week 1 was priced $6,600 as a top 3 expensive quarterback on the slate? Every single thing that I've heard is about Jameis Winston's week 1 performance. If you're only going to listen to week 1 performance, the worst performance that you're probably going to get out of Jameis Winston this year, if you're only going to be listening to that and judging your season off of that, you're probably going to be losing a lot in fantasy. So for the people who have reached out saying, how can you even like Jameis Winston in cash or in any format this week? He's in a great game environment. His price is super cheap. He's in a fantastic offense, and he looked good in week 2. But everybody's just stuck on week 1. It's crazy. All right, but I have a lot of interest in Jameis Winston in both formats, and I mean a lot. Tom Brady, interesting to me, but not a full interest right now. He's like a 23-point favorite here. But we saw him throwing a touchdown pass in the last 2 minutes of the last game when they were blowing out the Dolphins. So they're not concerned about getting Tom Brady pulled out of this game. They like to run their schemes. They like to do what they want to do on their game plan. They don't care what the score is. They're still going to do it. They're still going to test some things out. At that point, if it turns into a blowout, they'll use it as a scrimmage and test some things out. So you can get to Tom Brady and not worry about it overall in terms of him being yanked. And also, in terms of these quarterbacks, I'm saying them as one-offs, but I'm only in tournaments going to be stacking, team stacking and game stacking. So Jameis Winston opens up as an amazing stack option because he's cheap. Chris Godwin is too cheap. Mike Evans is way too cheap. And O.J. Howard, if you do want to go there, albeit risky, is very, very cheap as well. So that's why I have a lot more interest as well in Jameis, just in terms of what I'm doing in tournaments. You should be game stacking and team stacking all the time. Phillip Rivers, somewhat interesting with a nice implied total here. Nothing really stands out. They're going to funnel it to Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler. Mason Rudolph is somewhat interesting because of the price range. You have a lot of backup quarterbacks playing this week. Right now, as it stands, as I record this on Tuesday afternoon, Cam Newton might not be playing. So there's Kyle Allen potentially starting. Mason Rudolph starting. Daniel Jones was named the starter over Eli Manning. You have Teddy Bridgewater, backup quarterback, starting as well for the Saints. So lots of backup quarterbacks, so cheap pricing. I think Mason Rudolph is interesting at 4,800. Still has a nice offense around him. The defense is getting healthier. They just traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick. So overall, I do like what I saw when he came into the game, using his weapons, and especially Vance McDonald using him a lot more than Big Ben was through the small sample of the season. Carson Wentz, keep an eye on what the weapons look like. If Alshon and or Djax is in, it gives Carson Wentz a bump as they're a pretty big favorite here. We know the offense is just bulletproof. Keep an eye on all those guys. Keep an eye on Dallas Goedert. The health right now is a concern for this team on offense. We saw J-Jaw, the rookie, wide receiver, play like 90+% of the snaps. We saw Matt Collins get in there because of the 2 wide receiver injuries. Then we saw Zach Ertz play 100% of the snaps due to those injuries, due to Dallas Goedert getting nicked up. So keep an eye on that. But right now, my main interests are listed there in Y, and X is going to be sort of the secondary type interest. I'll make this a little bit bigger so people can see them a little bit better. So yeah, I do have exclusive content on Patreon. You can check that out as well. Now we're going to get into the running backs. Running backs is a shorter list than usual. Usually for my initial video, right? This usually is what my final thoughts video looks like at running back, right? It's pretty big here. But a couple things. There are so many running backs by committees. I listed like 16 to 17 to potentially 18 running backs by committee in this league. It's getting unreal, like to the point where there's a lot more teams going with 3 running backs in the rotation now. We saw this in Oakland last week when they were trailing. Josh Jacobs, RIP. Maybe not RIP, but anytime that they're behind, Josh Jacobs is going to be a very bad play. That's the way that it projects out this week, in my opinion. With the San Francisco 49ers, Matt Breida had a very good week, right? He looks productive. Only was on the field for less than 30% of the snaps. It's not going to be maintained. That's the thing. Mostert had 47% of the snaps there. So in terms of my interests, I'm just sticking to the guys that I think can get me 20+ touches. I'm not going to dumpster dive when there's so much value at wide receiver, so much value at quarterback. We just went over some of it. And then at tight end, there's also value. So why do I have to dumpster dive at running back when I know I'm going to be locked into elite usage, a lot of it in pass catching situations out of these upper tier running backs? So Saquon and Zeke, of course I have interest in them. They're both just so game flow independent, especially Saquon. We've seen it the first 2 weeks, going for over 20 fantasy points in each of the weeks where his team is really not really involved in the game. Blown out week 1, lose by 2 touchdowns week 2. Still, Saquon has a very good game. He's always going to be active in the red zone, goal line, pass catching work, whatever it is. Saquon Barkley at 9,100 is always in play. Same thing for Zeke as a huge favorite. Same thing goes for him and all the Cowboys that we talk about during this video. Already said it with Dak. If you're worried that Zeke gets pulled in the fourth quarter here, after playing 76% of the snaps and having 25 touches last week, and he still hasn't gotten in terms of his receiving role, only 2 targets last week, I think 1 week 1, he's going to get active in the receiving game. He's going to have 4 to 5 targets per game by the end of this year in terms of his average. So you're going to see that come up for sure. That is yet to be uncaged, which I imagine it might be this week. But if Dallas is up 35-3 at the beginning of the fourth quarter, Zeke has had a game. You could be damn sure that Zeke and or Dak have had games. Zeke probably has over 100 yards and or multiple scores. So I have no concerns about getting away from Zeke. He makes for a very good cash play if you can afford it. Makes for a very good tournament play if you can afford it. Christian McCaffrey, there's interest, but now this Cam Newton news is making me worrisome. Look, Cam looked terrible in the first couple of weeks, but in week 1, he at least kept his drive sustained. Week 2, he looked really bad, but apparently this foot injury was really limiting him. If Kyle Allen starts, there's a really good chance that's a lot of stalled drives. Now, Kyle Allen played last year, looked okay at some points, but nothing great, right? Christian McCaffrey, overall, going to still have a high floor because of his passing game work, with Kyle Allen still going to dump off to him if he is indeed starting. But overall, like, the ceiling gets capped because the ability to keep the drives alive on Kyle Allen's front are not nearly as good as Cam Newton. Even though Cam hasn't been good this year, it's not even close, the different skill level between the two of them. So Christian McCaffrey, an interest of mine. I said it on the Awesome show that I have the most interest in Zeke and McCaffrey. After this Cam Newton news, it's going to be Saquon and McCaffrey Saquon and Zeke from the top end range. I have interest in Dalvin Cook. Look, the guy looks fantastic. He's playing a lot of snaps. He looks amazing. He's getting involved in the receiving game after having 3 catches in the passing game last week. Looks great. I mean, there's not much to say. 7,800 is too cheap of a price point. Really good chance that he's in the 8K range next week. I think he's fine, and I like the fact that he's getting involved in the receiving game. Austin Eckler is too cheap at 7,200. This guy's just a smash play. 23 touches for Austin Eckler last week. He has now had at least 17 touches in every single game. That's 5 now that Melvin Gordon has been out over the last 2 years. And I only imagine they continue to rise. There's still no Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry made Austin Eckler's overall ceiling go up, and he already had a high floor and high ceiling. He had 17 attempts on the ground, 6 more catches. I think his floor is like 4 receptions, if I'm being honest with you, especially with no Hunter Henry, because this is a bad offensive line. And then when they're passing the ball, they're looking at Keenan Allen, 15 targets last week, and Austin Eckler. Like, they need to get the ball out quick. It's very hard to look down the field. Mike Williams, 5 targets last week is honestly a lot for a guy running deep down the field. Austin Eckler is just way too cheap at 7,200. His splits are way far now, 73% of the snaps. He's running away from what I thought might be a closer to like a 60-40 split at the beginning of the year. Not even close. He's having about 75-25 split with Justin Jackson. Justin Jackson still being effective, but overall it's just Austin Eckler looking fantastic. And that receiving game upside on DraftKings is so big. He had another touchdown. He had a touchdown last week, but he had one called back as well. So would have been an even bigger day, 7,200, way too cheap. My final yes in terms of interest at running back is Marlon Mack. Really good spot. I believe they're a favorite in this game, the Colts. Home favorite. I believe it is. Either way, they're a favorite. Good spot for him against Atlanta, but he's not a pass-catching back. We saw Jordan Wilkins get in the receiving game last week. We saw Nyheim Hines. Like, Mack had 3 targets last week, but still not a lot that makes you as excited about this spot for him against Atlanta, who gives up a lot of points to running backs, especially pass-catching backs, as like Dalvin Cook week 1. But he's still too cheap as a guy who should get 19 touches week 1 on the ground, 20 week 2, should see 18 touches on the ground, some receiving game work, and it's a very favorable spot and a good matchup at a cheap price point. That's like the lowest that I go, though. Like $5,800 Marlon Mack is like the lowest interest that I have. We'll get into some of my secondary interests, you can call them. Kamara with Teddy Bridgewater. I imagine Kamara has to get more involved. Was not involved at all in the receiving game, in a game where they were trailing for the most part. I don't know what the heck happened there. His overall snaps went down to 65%. We saw Latavius Murray get about 35% of the snaps. That was the same split you saw last year with Mark Ingram, but I'm not sure why Kamara's receiving game role. That's something that I imagine they turn around next week. Le'Veon Bell, he's in a game with a total of like 11 for the Jets. That's terrible. But we saw him have 31 touches last week. He saw 8 targets when Folk came in, who's going to be starting next week with Trevor Siemian now out for the year, and Darnold out with mono for a while. $7,000 is too cheap for Bell, who likely in this game sees a minimum of like 18 to 20 touches, with the upside like we saw last week of still his 28 to 30 touch roll. 10 catches is fantastic. You're not going to see that every week, but there's a real chance that his floor is like 6 catches with Folk at the quarterback position. I think Bell is interesting, but the team total is obviously not great. He's going to have to get most of his work done in the receiving game because he's going to be down so big. He probably only has in this game like 12, 13 carries on the ground, I would imagine. So really you're banking on him touching the ball in the air like 6 to 8 times. I think he can. I just don't have as much interest as these other guys, especially when Austin Eckler is only at $200 more, rather get there, and Dalvin Cook's only $800 more, rather get there. David Johnson, somewhat interesting at 6,800, more of a tournament play, something I really don't get to all that much, but he's going to be used as a receiver a lot. Hurt his wrist last week, but he seems good to go. Aaron Jones played 58% of the snaps, but when he was on the field, he was touching the ball. 23 carries was a season high, 27 overall touches. They lined him up as a receiver a couple of times. That looked really good. Denver, though, top 10 in run defense the first 2 weeks. He's pretty good at his price point, Aaron Jones, but you're still getting Jamal Williams on the field for about half the snaps, honestly, through the first 2 weeks, about 45 to 48% of the snaps. That's not great. We saw sort of like a ceiling game out of Aaron Jones last week, 27 touches, by far the most he's had in his career. Maybe that's something to tell out of this new offense that ran Derrick Henry a ton last year when Matt LaFleur, the new Packers head coach, was there in Tennessee. Maybe that's telling. More athletic running back here, in my opinion, than Aaron Jones. I probably just don't get there this week. GPP only option, but now that the price point and the ownership is likely coming up on him, it's probably a spot where I don't get there as much. James White, always in playing GPPs. He's just always going to be a target. Last year, he led all running backs in fantasy points per touch. He's very effective. Scored a touchdown again last week. He's still too cheap. The price point didn't move from 5,100. LaShawn McCoy, I'm only going to be interested if Damian Williams misses times. Apparently, LaShawn McCoy's injury is okay. Damian Williams, are still waiting to hear. Raheem Mostert, I don't get here because he's going to play like 50% or less of the snaps, but he is the running back out of San Francisco I would play in a tournament over everybody else. He also had a touchdown called back this week after having a very good and effective week on only 47% of the snaps. Matt Breida, if you're asking why I don't have interest in him, he only played 29% of the snaps last week. Yes, he was very effective, but if you're telling me to start a guy who's only going to be on the field for a third of the game, if that, why would I do that? Jeff Wilson was getting a lot of goal line touches, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He also saw 10 touches. 3 running backs saw 10-plus touches in this backfield for San Fran last week. Why would I go there when I can go everywhere else and just pay up and get value at the wide receiver position? There's so many better wide receivers at the 5 and 4K range this week than there are at running back, and it's not even close. So Frank Gore, another guy to keep an eye on at 4,400. I think he's dust, but he has a good matchup. Good to okay to good matchup against Cincinnati on the ground. They seem to be improved this year, that Cincinnati rush defense. But if Devin Singletary is out, Frank Gore should play the far majority of the snaps. And at 4,400, it's at least worth consideration, but nothing major on my end. A couple things I'll point out. Chris Carson, look, 5,900 is too cheap, but we have CJ Prosise played about 15% of the snaps last week. That's worrisome for Carson. You saw a bump for Rashad Penny, who is playing well, saw 33%. Carson went from playing 77% of the snaps to 54. That's worrisome. And I don't really care too much about Penny. He's going to play about 25 to 30% of the snaps each week anyways. It's Prosise getting involved in a receiving game, right? 5 touches, 3 coming in the air. That's worrisome for me. Mark Ingram starting to become a 3-headed backfield there with Justice Hill and now Gus Edwards seeing 20% of the snaps in that last game. Mark Ingram only 58%. I don't think it stays that extreme, but I don't think Mark Ingram breaks out either in terms of getting like 80% of the snaps. Kerryon Johnson only 54% of the snaps last week. 24 total running back touches for the Lions last week. Only 12 went to Kerryon. These guys are a bunch of donkeys. Matt Patricia and that team in Detroit just not giving your best player potentially on the team more work. Joe Mixon, injury concerns. Keep an eye on that. They seem like they want to get Gio more involved after they paid him. Talked about Matt Breida. Josh Jacobs. Dwayne Washington was on the field for like 20% of the snaps. You saw 30% of the snaps going to Jalen Richard, the better and by far the better passing catching back than Washington, and it seems Jacobs as well, in a game where they were trailing. Well, Oakland's going to be trailing a lot this year, so if Josh Jacobs is going to be exclusively a rusher, that's worrisome for me, in my opinion, especially for fantasy. 5,300 the price point comes up to after being 4,700 last week. I just have no interest. Like Washington being there is actually a really big concern, getting about 20% of the work. Now, maybe part of that was because Jacobs now they're saying is coming out with an injury, so keep an eye on that. But anyways, it doesn't seem like he's going to be involved much in the passing game. That seems to be Jalen Richard's role. Keep an eye on James Conner. If he's out, $5,300 Jalen Samuels becomes interesting. Devonta Freeman is very cheap, but he's in a clear split right now with, it seems, Ito Smith, and the same can be said in Denver. 52% of the snaps last week to Royce Freeman, 48% of the snaps last week to Phillip Lindsay, and the big thing that's really bad for Lindsay, 7 targets for Royce Freeman. So the main reason that you liked Lindsay more was because of the targets, not last week. Wide receiver is always going to be let's move to wide receiver, I should say first. Wide receiver is always going to be my deepest position in terms of my initial interest and end interest because there's just so many more viable wide receivers, right? There's only 32 teams, which means there's 15, 20, interesting at most running backs each week. Whereas there's 2 to 3 wide receivers on each team. We can start getting into the 40. We can say 40 guys are viable in tournaments. So I'm going to try and break it down as best as possible. And yes, there's going to be guys that I don't have interest in or don't have as much interest in as of right now because there's just so many guys in those price ranges. Like Julio Jones probably would be more or should be a lot more priced up. 7,300 in these defense is actually better than a lot of people realize, especially last year they came on a little bit better, a lot worse against running backs last year than wide receivers. But yeah, overall, Julio Jones, how do you not like this? I get it. He just had a ceiling game, but he's still unguardable. He's still fantastic. There's no cornerback on this secondary that you're scared of, really scared of in terms of locking him down. It's just a fantastic spot for a guy who's going to play 85+% of the snaps. Keenan Allen's price is broken. By far, probably the most broken price point. One of the most broken price points on DraftKings is Keenan Allen, $7,000. He has 25 targets so far. Philip Rivers is only looking to Keenan Allen and Austin Eckler so far to start this season. He's in an offense that wants to funnel it to him in the slot and the running back, so short passes are going to continue there. Why is he this cheap? I don't understand. $7,000? Are you kidding me? Likely one of the most underrated players in the entire league. Yeah, I'm getting to Keenan Allen a lot this week, and you should too. Chris Godwin's too cheap at $6,900. We already talked about it with Jameis. I'll say the exact same stuff I say for Mike Evans, although Mike Evans will probably be lower owned than Godwin. Both of them are in really good spots to game stack with Jameis this week. Run it back with whoever you want in the Giants, whether it's Evan Ingram, whether it's Saquon Barkley. Those are the only 2 spots I would actually recommend. But yeah, it's a really good spot overall. Godwin's look fantastic. Has not left the field once Winston steps on it. So does Godwin. They don't leave. He's on all the snaps, it seems, 90+, and he's in the slot a whole bunch, which is clearly very beneficial for the wide receiver. If you don't know why already, it's because they can use the entire field. They get to face usually a worse cornerback, and they just not being stuck to one side of the field, not being able, if you're on the left hash, to turn left because you're out of bounds. You can use your whole skill set in the slot. I have a very strong stance on Sammy Watkins this week, and it's that he's a fantastic play. Look, Baltimore's still battling injuries in their secondary. This is why I loved Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald last week, especially Kirk, because this was not the same Baltimore team you're used to. Jimmy Smith was out last week. Tavon Young was out, 2 cornerbacks. Marlon Humphreys was very, very limited last week, and it seems to me, at least, that most of that's going to stay true for this week as well. Marlon Humphreys probably get closer to full health, but I don't know if Jimmy Smith will play. We'll have to keep an eye on that. I don't know if Tavon Young will play. You have to keep an eye on that. That leaves this team very weak once again. Now you have Patrick Mahomes rolling in. with a very high, the highest game total on the slate. Sammy Watkins is 6,800. His price came down. His ownership will likely come down. But nothing changed for this man. He just wasn't the one catching the long touchdown passes. He should have. Patrick Mahomes missed him one time, but he just wasn't. He had 11 targets week 1, 13 targets last week, 24 targets on the year. If this man's name was Tyreek Hill at 6,800, he would be over-owned today, or at least on Sunday, right? But his name's Sammy Watkins, so people don't like it as much, and he just burned you last week because he only had like a decent 6 catches or a decent amount of catches on 13 targets. Like, he's still getting looks from Patrick Mahomes. Nothing has changed for him except his price is lower and probably his ownership comes in lower. Get to Sammy Watkins this week. Already talked about Mike Evans. Julian Edelman still played 90+% of the snaps. I get it that Antonio Brown saw 8 targets. Antonio Brown only played 33% of the snaps last week. A lot more going on this week with him and another person coming out on allegations for Brown. Keep an eye on that. I think Edelman is viable against the Jets, especially in the slot where the Jets have really nobody to guard Edelman. Diggs is very cheap at 6,000. This is a run-first team, but Diggs is still going to be out there running great routes. He had 1 touchdown on 1 catch for 49 yards, but he had 3 catches ruled back for penalties, 2 offensive pass interferences, 1 on a pick play in the end zone. So he had a big week that was turned around. Still had a good week, right? A 49-yard touchdown, but a lot more would have happened. He would have had 3 more catches and an extra touchdown if it was not for penalties. And the main thing is he's just too cheap, in my opinion, against Oakland. $6,000 is worth looking into. I already talked about John Brown. He is not just a burner, people. He has a very good matchup against Cincinnati's secondary. He's still too cheap. Price only comes up $300. And he's not just a guy who's going to run straight down the field. He was running short and intermediate slant routes last week and just curl routes, which is fantastic, right? You get that kind of security in a guy like John Brown, who's looked really good in the first 2 weeks if you watched any Bills games. I really like John Brown. Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk, I'll attack them both at once. And I'll also attack another guy who's $3,000 on this team, Demir Brown. These 3 wide receivers on Arizona are in the top 4 in yards per route run and routes run overall this year. That means they're running a lot of plays and they're running a lot of 3 and 4 wide receiver sets. I have a lot of interest in Fitzgerald, more interest in the guy who's slightly cheaper by $100, Christian Kirk. He's been tackled on the 1-yard line twice this year. That's crazy. Already so far through 2 weeks, Kirk's looked really good. So is Fitzgerald. Get to these wide receivers. They have a good matchup. They're going to have so many offensive snaps, and they're not running the ball. Like, they're using David Johnson as a receiver more and more. So when they have all these extra plays on offense because they're running so fast, right now the fastest paced team in the league, yeah, you're getting more overall passing attempts, especially with the reluctancy to run as of right now. Mecole Hardman is a great option. Would have had a bigger week last week if his 72-yard touchdown wasn't called back. He's fine to get to, especially in a team or game stack with Kansas City. Getting to, if you don't run Patrick Mahomes, if you do, it's fine. If you don't run him and you just want to get to a couple of wide receivers in this game, Sammy Watkins and Mecole Hardman are fantastic. You can get back to Robinson, who had 90+% of the snaps. I think that's okay as well. I just think the ownership will be there. And the price point on Robinson has come up as well. You're getting Mecole Hardman actually for cheaper now. Emmanuel Sanders is too cheap. The last yes interest I have, then you can look at the X's, and I'm not going to get too deep into them. I'll scroll and you guys can look at them. But Emmanuel Sanders is too cheap. What does he have now? 24 targets through 2 weeks, I believe it is, or 23. Looks fantastic, catching 16 or 20 targets, and he has 16 catches. That's what it is, an 80% catch rate. He looks fantastic in the slot. 2 touchdowns, 1 in each week. And now Green Bay's defense looks amazing. I'm a Packer fan. They look really good. Their liability is in the slot. Tramon Williams, 36 years old, oldest defensive back in the league. He got burnt last week for the touchdown to Diggs. He was getting burnt left and right week 1 to Allen Robinson. I believe he got burnt by Diggs. Maybe I'm wrong on that one. But he did not look good. He did not grade out good. By far, he got burnt week 1 a ton by Allen Robinson. He graded out poorly last week. And then overall, Emmanuel Sanders now is going to get up against him in the slot a bunch where it looks like Joe Flacco is keying in on him. Cortland Sutton last week had a tough matchup overall on the outside against the Bears, but he still had 7 targets. So the volume is still going to Sanders in the slot. I do think Sanders is way too cheap. And then my X's, there's so many wide receivers we can touch on, guys, here. Tyler Boyd seems to be in a very elite role as the Robert Woods of this new Zach Taylor offense. Zach Taylor was the wide receivers and QB coach for 2017 and 2018 with the Rams, right? And it seems like Tyler Boyd is taking on that Robert Woods, Mr. Reliability. 10 catches on 12 targets, over 100 yards last week after coming off of a very good, stable floor game of like 6 catches for 80 yards. So I think Tyler Boyd is still in play. The worry is that he gets White, right? Tre'Davious White for Buffalo. But I think John Ross might actually get him. So Tyler Boyd's too cheap. Tyler Lockett's still too cheap. Marquise Brown goes from playing 18 snaps or 18% of the snaps now to 65% of the snaps. I think there's more upside there now at only 5,900. Calvin Ridley's still too cheap. He's playing only limited snaps, like 65% of the snaps because he's operating out of the slot a lot. Sanu and Julio Jones were playing on the outside for most of week 2. But but he's still too cheap at 53. John Ross, I think there's actual legitimacy behind the season he's having so far as the Brandon Cooks of Zach Taylor's offense, although he might get the Tre'Davious White treatment, which is not great. DK Metcalf, 4,700, way too cheap, right? Preston Williams, 3,700. If there's one guy on Miami you want to play, it might be Preston Williams. Look, this is not me vouching for the guy, but he's only 3,700. He saw 68% of the snaps last week after seeing sub 30% week one. The rookie out there, I think from Colorado State, I'm not positive, but he's going to continue seeing more and more snaps, and he by far has talent, should continue to see some targets if you want a cheap option. Nelson Aguilar at 3,600. My worry here is that Darius Slay guards him. Darius Slay has looked very good so far this year, like very, very good. Coming off of like a career year last year, looked very good last week. When he was on Keenan Allen in the slot, he actually limited Allen's game overall when he was actually on him. Like, Allen had 15 targets, did not have an eruption game like he could have had. Darius Slay was a big reason why, and I think Darius Slay will be on Nelson Aguilar if indeed Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey are out. Keep an eye on that. We have so much more news that we have to go through throughout the week. That's why potentially Nelson Aguilar will become interesting. JJ Arceo-Whiteside, the rookie out there, will become potentially interesting. Same thing for Matt Collins. Devin Smith, $3,400. He's not a yes for me yet, but he's very interesting at that price point. So keep an eye on him with no Michael Gallup's going to be out for a little while for Dallas. He'll take on that role. Looked very good, right? He had 3 targets, caught all of them, 74 yards and a touchdown, former Jet. So he'll be going into this high octane, I guess you can say, Kellen Moore offense out there in Dallas. Looks okay. You can see the rest of the yeses here. James Washington is, or X's, my maybes. James Washington, Damiere Byrd at minimum price. Let's get the tight end. So if you're still watching this video right now, and we're pretty deep into it, hop into the comments. Who is somebody that's like your sleeper for the week, right? Only you will be seeing this if you watch this far. I appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button if you have not yet already. So, tight ends for the week. Travis Kelce's too cheap. Like, people, you might think he's expensive at 7,100. Take away the tight end name. If you put him as a wide receiver, which he is in this offense, right? He ran down the left hash mark last week for a touchdown. He was on the outside. Like, he's a wide receiver at 7,100. If you put him in that price range, he's priced right around Keenan Allen, right around Juju. It makes him a very good play. So just take away the tight end name on him and just picture him as a wide receiver, because that's the position he pretty much plays on this team for the most part. So he's way too cheap. Zach Ertz played 100% of the snaps last week. Keep an eye. If Alshon and or Djax are out, I'll have a lot more interest in Ertz. I have a ton of interest in Evan Ingram this week. It doesn't get any worse than it did last week for Evan Ingram, right? And he still caught 6 balls on 8 targets for 38 or 48 yards, something. Yeah, 48 yards. Had 10.8 fantasy points. And that was realistically his floor. Like, Eli looked terrible. Really, really bad. Like, Danny Dimes cannot look that bad. And Danny Dimes will also have a lot better of a matchup than playing against Buffalo last week in Buffalo. So, yeah, I think it's a very good spot for Evan Ingram. Price point doesn't change after having a floor game of 10.8 points, which is just crazy. Mark Andrews, only 53% of the snaps he played last week. That was like the most he's ever played, 53%, which is why I'm usually low on him. But he continues to just keep lighting it up, right? Like, he's just running so many routes, and he's not going to have a 100% catch rate like he has, but even if you drop 2 catches off a game, he's still having a good game each time. Week 1, his touchdown came from Robert Griffin III, but last week he was wide open for a touchdown. Mark Andrews has to be in play now. I'm somebody who hasn't been buying into him because of his overall snaps, but when he's on the field, he's running a lot of routes, so his price point's too cheap. Vance McDonald, 90+% of the snaps last week, and you saw Mason Rudolph looking his way a ton, both touchdowns coming from Rudolph. He has to be in play. And then my somewhat interest, I think Darren Waller's a yes. I'm going to do this live right now. Darren Waller, yes, he played 100% of the snaps week 1, 95% of the snaps last week, led the team in receiving yards. Whoa, I'm getting a FaceTime. That's no good. Get out of here. Led the team in receiving yards last week. I think I have to put this on Do Not Disturb for that not to happen. You just saw my face and my sister calling me. But yeah, we led the team in receiving yards last week at 90, or he had 60-something yards. Led the team in snaps at tight end clearly both weeks. He leads the team in targets in the last 2 weeks to start the season. But yeah, Waller right now with Jared Cook. Taking over Jared Cook's role in this John Gruden offense that heavily favors tight ends. He looks very, very good. Greg Olsen is okay. O.J. Howard is okay, running a lot less routes, which is worrisome, but the price point is cheap. And Austin Hooper, a guy who's just like Mr. Reliable at the tight end position, but also has a ceiling on him. All these guys are the below 4K interest that I have. That's it. That's my picks, right? My interest, really. Picks is just a weird word right now. Appreciate it. Let me know what you think of the video. You can follow me on Twitter at SalVetraDFS. I will be live just on Thursday night before locks, Sunday before the game starts. Hopefully we hit 10,000 subscribers by then. That would be awesome. I'll have my final looks video on Friday. I'll have a couple more videos throughout the week. My That One Dude video, my Thursday night football video. A live Patreon stream on Wednesday for only patrons. Check out all my content. Linked in the description is my Patreon, my sports courses, some free, my fantasy sports courses, my free down below guides and giveaways Twitter is at SalVetriDFS. Appreciate you tuning in for this one. Thank you so much. Hit the like button and subscribe button before you leave. My name's Sal. I need some water. My mouth is so dry. Peace out, gang.
Hey, hold up. 1 second. Check out this page. If you haven't yet subscribed, hit the subscribe button, all right? And if you're interested in Patreon, if you're not already a Patreon, you can hit that button on Patreon, become a Patreon. It will take you right there. You can also check me out on Twitter at SalVetriDFS. And hey, if you're interested, this next video that's about to pop up, why don't you check it out as well. See ya.